Okay.
Oh, there we are. All right, we are live, everyone. Very, very, very live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another guest artist interview with Roundabout. We have Pippa Hill here, the literary manager of the Royal Shakespeare Company. As always, Sean Stewart, our writer and director, Daniel Hurton, our technical designer, and Nikki Jones joining us as well, our stage manager. And we're here to try and pry some questions out of Pippa, and see what we get, and where what useful information for NIDA students and ordinary public might want to know.
Well, let's cut directly to the chase. Head of Literary for the Royal Shakespeare Company and Chief Dramaturg. What is a dramaturg, and what do you actually do?
Great question. So I'm responsible for commissioning and developing all of the non-Shakespeare plays at the RSC. And we currently have about 40 writers under commission, all working on brand new plays. And we commission new plays we've got 3 stages in Stratford-upon-Avon, a studio space for about 200 people, the Swan Theatre for about 500, and the Royal Shakespeare Theatre, which houses an audience of 1,000. And my job, essentially, is to make sure that there are some very exciting new shows constantly in the pipeline, in development, to feed those 3 stages. And we mix up our programming with new work, classical repertoire, Jacobean, Elizabethan plays, and obviously Shakespeare. And my role as dramaturg is to ensure that all of those writers have a bespoke journey, basically, of development. It takes about 3 to 5 years to write a play for the Swan Theatre, 3 to 6 or 7 years to write a play for the Royal Shakespeare Theatre. And the Studio Theatre, the other place, works on a rhythm of 6 months to 14 months, roughly. And the role of dramaturg, really, it just means storytelling. It's just about keeping an eye on the storytelling, and at the beginning making sure always really making sure that the piece of writing is delivering the vision that the writer set out to deliver. That's all it is, really.
One of the things, just to follow up, and then I'll toss over to Nikki. One of the things I remember you talking about, we were about to do something, or we were going to meet the day after, and you said between that you were going to a show to watch a late rehearsal and try to, I think you said something to the effect that you wanted to make sure that if the point is made in action, don't have it also made in words, or if you've done something with the lighting, don't double up. So those kind of dramatic double beats. So I guess the question I have there is, I'm very used to the process of editing on paper, but it sounds like you're doing that kind of shaping right the way along, including the sort of performed version.
Yeah, so the job changes on each show it normally starts, so it's never the same twice, but it normally starts off with one-to-one sessions with the writer on the script, on the idea and on the script, and draft to draft, working with the writer, reading the draft, spending half a day with them, talking through the beats. But as you get closer and closer to production, the role alters, because of course you get all of the other collaborators coming in, and also augmenting the storytelling from their specific discipline. So production dramaturgy, I think, is one of the things that we do a great deal of. So I'm in rehearsal a lot. I'm in all of the previews. I'm in all of the early performances. And that is, it's about making sure that you haven't got a double or triple narrative beat. I mean, particularly in musicals. I mean, we just opened The Boy in the Dress the end of last year, and there you've got the composers, you've got the musicians, you've got choreography, you've got design, you've got so many layers of storytelling. And actually, my job is just to make sure that we're not overstating, because then it's really annoying for the audience if they get the same piece of information 4 times. And actually, sometimes it is just a changing lighting state that absolutely sums up exactly what you need to deliver from the writer's perspective. They just didn't know it when they wrote the script. So there is a lot of that sort of nuanced work that goes on when we get into production.
Just to echo something that was just said in the chat, but was also on my list of questions for you. As someone who loves working with writers and someone who has this within reaching distance, how did you get there? You have maybe my ideal job. Tell me about your life pre-RSC.
That's a great question. I did a lot of, I went to Edinburgh University and I worked on the Fringe. So I've got a practical theatre background. And I made plays, made shows, and then I got my first theatre job as a receptionist at the Hampstead Theatre under Jenny. And for 2 days a week, she let me work for the literary manager, Jeannie O'Hare, who was recently at Yale as a head of. She's since come back. She was at the Public Theatre as well as the head of literary there in New York. And I was allowed to do that in my lunch break, in my spare time. And I then worked at which is a famous for and we just did a lot of brand new plays. And then it so happened that the Royal Shakespeare Company felt that they needed someone to get a draft of writers, a new generation of writers. And I went in on that ticket and have hung on to it. So I've been there 10 years, and actually it's a job that's constantly changing, and that makes it very addictive.
We had a bit of audio breakup. So I was a receptionist, crackle, crackle, and then they hired me at the RSC. I just wonder if there was a missing term there between receptionist and...
The audience thinks you worked at Hampstead Theatre at the moment.
Hampstead.
Okay, is that better? Is that working okay?
Hampstead.
Yep.
There you go, everyone. It's Hampstead, not
Hampstead Theatre. Yeah, so I worked at Hampstead, and then I worked, I got a job at Payne's Plough Theatre Company, which is a UK touring company who famously had Sarah Kane and Mark Ravenhill working at the company in the 90s. Wow. Did a lot of very cutting edge new work. And it so happened that the Royal Shakespeare Company were looking for someone to come in and bring some new, younger playwrights in. And I rejoined my old boss, Jeannie O'Hare, at the Royal Shakespeare Company. And I've been there ever since.
So the name Ravenhill jumps out for me. Also involved in Boy on the Dress?
Yeah, it's the book writer, yeah.
He also wrote Pool No Water, which showed at NIDA last year, which I believe Daniel worked on.
Yeah, stage manager for that one. We gave it a go.
How was it?
I think it's very dense script.
It was well received. I think it was hard to work on though.
Yeah, I just remember in the rehearsal room having to relabel all of the lines every time we decided to go a different direction with with who was going to say what. But no, I really enjoyed working on that one.
Yeah, Mark and I, we've worked together, well, since I was at Payne's Plough, and he was writer in residence for me at the Royal Shakespeare Company. I think it was 2012 into 2013. So I had him for a couple of years actually, but he's still, I quite often come into work to my office in Tottenham Court Road, and he's sitting at my desk as I come in, because his gym is around the corner. So he pops in, sits down, checks his emails, waits for me to come in, and we have a coffee. But he's we worked together for the last 3 years on the book of The Boy in the Dress. He is one of my favourite playwrights.
So you segue naturally into one of my questions for you. Mark Ravenhill, you say, was your writer in residence. You have another writer in residence who's always in residence. And something that we talked about once before, but I'd love to hear you speak on more, is you're a person who's, in my limited experience, very interested in, well, as you just said, in new work, in things that are current and things that speak to today. Your in-house playwright is pretty great, but has been dead 400 years. How do you balance trying to keep something that speaks to the moment with the fact that you can't not do Shakespeare?
That's a great question. One of the things about the company that I didn't know when I joined it, but I have since understood, is that the company was conceived as a theatre company that did new work and the work of Shakespeare and his contemporaries. So our first writer in residence actually was Harold Pinter in the 60s. He wrote a lot of plays for us. Yeah. That whole era was a balance of new work and the contemporary rep, the classical rep. And what you get when you put artists who are used to working on new work onto the classical rep and classical artists onto new work is a really extraordinary cross-pollination. So what we've understood is that we're able to develop really big, epic, meaty, often political plays that sit very comfortably alongside the classical rep. And we have a whole raft of directors who are used to working on new plays, so approaching a new play that hasn't had a performance before, approaching a classical play in that way is really thrilling, actually. So we have a lot of directors, Polly Findlay, Maria Arberg, to name but two, who have come in from a new work background and taken on the classics, and in a way treated those big classical plays, and often plays from the Jacobean rep as well, as if they're a new play. So really exploring them in a totally contemporary way. I think the truth is that part of my responsibility is to acknowledge that a huge chunk of our work at the Royal Shakespeare Company has been created by a dead white man. And my commissioning brief is to create a foil to that as well, in terms of diversity, in terms of seeking out new voices, in terms of balancing our programming. But the truth is that the Shakespeare productions that we create are made really through a contemporary lens. So we might use sometimes contemporary costumes and contemporary set, actually most often. Sometimes we go back to the era in which the plays were written, but we always have contemporary theatre makers looking and exploring those plays from a contemporary perspective. So we rarely, I think, get trapped in feeling that we've made a piece of work that doesn't speak to a contemporary audience. And I think we're very careful to make sure that we're always connecting with younger audiences and making sure that those plays remain as relevant and extraordinary as they are. The other thing, the really big point, is that Shakespeare is quite a big pair of boots to fill. So as a contemporary writer coming to the company under commission, it sort of can be a bit terrifying. And I think part of my job is to try to reassure writers that actually what we really want is their best new play, not a play a bit like Shakespeare. But it's taking on the things that Shakespeare did and asking writers, challenging writers with that, looking at the political, looking at the macro and at the micro, what's going on in the world of politics, what's going on in the sort of grassroots of society. And as soon as you put those two things together, you've got the makings of an epic play.
That's such a nice way of phrasing that. I will say as a personal testimonial that I was there when I first came in the spring. I went to see the production you had, I think, in the Swan of King John.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Here I'm going to say, I have an English degree. I read Shakespeare for fun. I found myself thinking, did Shakespeare write a play called King John? Like, it's not in most people's top 5 list. It was staged circa 1962. Is that fair?
Yeah.
And it was awesome. And when I say that it was really good and really enjoyable, understand that when I saw that play, I sat down in your theater. I had not slept in 30 hours, nor did I for the entire length of King John. So no small compliment.
Yeah, there's an RSC YouTube channel if anyone wants to have a look. I think there's some clips from King John and loads of the recent shows that we've done, but it give you a good idea of what we're up to. We always have contemporary musicians, live musicians playing, and they're not often playing the lute. They're usually playing the electric guitar or the double bass, or have a look. It's a good place to check it out.
I just want to say at the start of Sean's question, we had someone in the chat say, treat classics like new plays and new plays like classics. And I believe you went on to say pretty much exactly that. Is that something that you...
Great.
Yeah, you agree with that sentiment?
Yeah.
For those that are watching, hopefully I won't get banned on the... No, because I'm mod. I just put the link to the Royal Shakespeare's YouTube page in the chat. So for those who are there, you can check that out after this.
Nikki, you want to take next question?
Yeah, kind of following on, talking about those new plays that you're working on, Pippa. A lot of them are adaptations of a kind of different things. So The Boy in a Dress, I know, was originally a kid's book, and then I also read about We Are Arrested, which is a novel. No.
Yeah.
How do you approach those adaptations? Do you have sort of a 1, 2, 3 step approach, or is it different based on what you're adapting?
Yeah, I mean, the adaptations, they're usually writer-led. So it's normally a playwright will come to the company and say, I really want to do this. I mean, that's what Mark did for Boy in the Dress. We're working on adaptation of The Magician's Elephant by Kate Camillo at the moment as well. And that was Nancy Harris and Mark Taitler came directly to me and said, we really, really want to adapt this book. It's brilliant. It's going to be perfect for the stage. We really want to work on it. So it's not normally me thinking, I wonder what would be, well, I wonder what would be the next. It's normally the other way around. It's normally writers who come with the idea. And actually, in my experience, if you've got a writer-led project, you've got a passion project, and you've got a very happy writer to begin with who hasn't had an idea imposed upon them. We Are Arrested was a little bit different because that was a forbidden text that had been written in Turkey and was a very, very political piece of work. And we decided that we really wanted the journalist Jan Dunder's work to speak for itself, really. And so the adaptation was actually done by me and the director with Jan. And that was really just a case of a lot of editing and workshopping to see how to make that work. But that was a political, very urgent political piece. So the process is normally different each time, but that's usually because it is led by a leading artist, by a writer who brings it to us on the whole.
What about The Whip?
The Whip is a brand new play by Juliet Gilks Romero. And Juliet, I invited along with 20 other writers to come and join us for a day of provocation. A few years ago, we invited some provocative speakers. And we asked all of the writers to pitch ideas for our studio space. And Juliet said, I've got this idea I want to come and talk to you about. And she came in for a meeting and she pitched this massive play about the abolition of slavery and also about the EU and Greece crashing out of the EU. And we got to the end of the meeting and I said, Juliet, you know and I know that that is not a studio show. That is a main stage show that you've just pitched. And she knew. But it was such a brilliant idea that I commissioned it that day, and we worked on it together for 3 years, and it went into production last year. But yeah, that was a brand new play. Yeah, it was based on. She's a brilliant researcher. She's an ex-journalist, Juliet. So she had found this tweet that the Treasury had put out a couple of years ago that the British public had finally paid off the bailout that had been given to British slave owners in the 1830s, and it had taken nearly 100 years to pay off the bailout. And
200
so
years.
that's 200 years. So that was her. She realised that her parents and there are a whole generation of people that come over in the Windrush generation who'd been paying off through their taxes the British bailout to slave owners in the UK. So it was a fascinating. But did you see it, Sean?
I did. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I mean, was it King John? But no, I really enjoyed it. And yeah, if you didn't catch the nugget of the story, it started with a tweet from the Treasury in 2015 saying,
That's right.
Hey guys, fun fact, you've just finished paying off slave owners. To which, for a significant segment of the population, discovering that them and their parents, grandparents, great-grandparents had been still paying the debt for a buyout, the cost of ending the slave trade in Britain amounted to, I want to say it was almost 30% of GDP.
That's right, yeah.
So it was, a lot of money through a series of escalating. It was one of those things that started where we'll pay, we will pay money to slaveholders up to, £1 per person. And at the end of the process, it was 500 pounds per person. And just this extraordinary concatenation of the worst people getting richer and richer and richer through a series of political maneuvers, which, speaking as someone who lives in the United States right now, feels all too apropos.
Yeah.
Obvious question, double-barreled question. I'm going to cheat and ask two at once. Of the reinterpretations that you've done of Shakespeare per se, which do you feel was the most successful, or a couple that you feel you did something that really both kept something true of the original and yet added something very new? And if you want to be brave, you can also say one that you felt didn't quite come off, although the RSC may never make mistakes. And then the follow-up question is just your own personal, like, if there is a Shakespeare play that you return to, one or two that are closest to your heart, it would be fun to know.
Wow, that's quite a complicated question. I suppose recently, the things that I found most thrilling in that auditorium have been shows that have reinterpreted the politics in a really, really extraordinary way. I think we always try and do that, but I would say that Iqbal Khan's Othello, I thought was completely amazing. I think Erica Wyman's Romeo and Juliet is probably up there with one of my best all-time theatre experiences. Greg did an amazing production of Troilus and Cressida, which I thought was just astonishing. It was sort of like Mad Max. They were like motorbikes, and it was just wild and so extraordinary and so brilliant. I remember coming out of it sort of feeling high, like I sort of couldn't really believe what I'd seen. It was just extraordinary. So I guess those are up there. There've been some amazing shows in there recently. I mean, just really, really thrilling, brilliant.
I know our mutual friend Graham was incredibly struck by the Taming of the Shrew that he saw there.
Oh yeah, Justin Alderweir's production of Taming the Shrew was just joyful, but also excruciating. If any of you get the chance to have a look, it was completely amazing. By reversing all of the genders of the characters on stage, the misogyny of that play just became so unbearable. It was really extraordinary. Really extraordinary. Yeah, that was brilliant. I'm glad Graham saw that, because I thought that was a brilliant show. Yeah, there's been some one. The whole Rome season as well was really extraordinary. Julius Caesar that Angus Jackson directed was glorious. I guess the shows that often feel like they've taken the most risk are the ones that tend to divide people. So I'd say, you know, that's part of the point of the company. If you've got a government subsidy in the way that we have as the Royal Shakespeare Company, it's our responsibility to take risk. But you can't take risks without sometimes falling on your face a bit. You know, you have to be allowed to make mistakes. We mostly make mistakes in the workshop stage and in the rehearsal stage, so that by the time we get to production stage, we've ironed out the things that don't really work. Having said that, the things that I think are often most challenging are technical risks that we've taken. I remember Greg's production, he had this sort of huge globe that sort of lowered down onto the stage with one of the actors inside, and I think actually it worked really, really well, but we were all sitting on the first night going, is it gonna or isn't it? So the previews can sometimes be a bit a bit of a white knuckle ride, but I would say on the whole, because of the way that we make our shows, we have quite a long rehearsal period. We usually have a company that of actors who are in 2 or 3 shows at a time, so it's often months that they're working on the shows. We have quite a lot of time to iron out things that the inventive things that we're
right.
trying for the first time. Favorite Shakespeare play? That's really hard. I guess Romeo and Juliet. Just always loved it. I think Yeah, I think Erica's recent production was astonishing. I guess I've always had a real soft spot for King Lear. Just think it's a brilliant play. And also, I mean, I think for my money, King John, massively underrated. It's a really good play. It's really brilliant.
That first act is,
Yeah.
the first act feels stronger than the second in the, sorry, not the Shakespeare, just as I saw it performed. All right, the bit before the break is maybe stronger than the bit after the break, but it's got all the good stuff that the good history plays have. As I've seen relatively few Shakespeare plays staged. I've seen, 5 to 10 productions, of which 3 of them have been Midsummer, because that's how that goes. I would someday, I don't know what it's like to stage Henry IV Part 1. It would make a great science fiction novel. I've been thinking about writing the sci-fi version of Henry IV Part 1 since I was 19.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of got everything, and is wonderfully written on top of it. So I'd love to, that's not underrated by people who know Shakespeare, but I think to the general public, how good those plays are, because we know the big comedies and tragedies, and the history ones always feel like, I don't know, lots of swords and codpieces, as you would say. But that's a terrific play, or terrific piece of storytelling. Maybe, I don't know if it's staged as well or not.
Just adding on to, sorry, just adding on to Sean's.
I think you were asking the same question I was about to anyway.
Yeah. We've got someone in the chat asking what Shakespeare is emerging as a play that most resonates with the 2020s, do you think? Just kind of similar to what Sean was asking, but
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't know the answer.
Well,
I feel
one version has to be the fact, how many times have people mentioned that Lear was written during the plague season since COVID started, right? It was written while the theaters were closed for plague, and that has been mentioned to me a lot.
I mean, for me, the truthful answer is that I think if you get the right creative team on any Elizabethan or Jacobean text, they will unearth the relevancy of that writer's vision now. And I've worked on some really obscure Jacobean scripts. Probably the 2 top ones were The Roaring Girl, which we did a production of a few years ago, and which, very, very rarely done, which had a cross-dressing female lead, and it was all about sort of provincial politics, but really toxic provincial politics. And I recently worked on The Fantastic Follies of Mrs. Rich, which is by Mary Picks, which is just a glorious play, again about greedy, snobbish, elitist societies. And essentially, it's all there because, unfortunately, human experience just constantly kind of repeats itself. So it's a really difficult question to answer. I do think the key is to have an inquiring creative team that are really, really interested in unearthing how that writer speaks to a contemporary audience, a dead writer from 400 years ago, how their views transmit to an audience now. And I think you'll always find it, if you look hard enough, you'll always find it in any of those plays. It's there. It's there.
So you've spoken a lot about technical design and how that in itself can help change the message of a play with like a lighting cue, as you mentioned before. A question we got from the audience was, could you talk further about the dramaturg's role in technical design?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I discovered a few years ago was that I had rarely spent much time in the tech for new plays. And actually, I learned this on Don Quixote. We did an adaptation of Don Quixote, which was by James Fenton and directed by Angus Jackson. And I worked on that as the dramaturg with Angus. And we discovered there's a whole section in Don Quixote in the second book where there's a flying horse. It's a pretend flying horse, but there's a lot of pyrotechnics involved. And we discovered in the course of the tech that the pyrotechnic packed wooden horse required, because of the amount of time we needed to set off the pyros, it required some text around. It required some text. We needed more time. So we had to go back to James and say, is there any way we could maybe have another speech at this point? Because the tech, essentially, if we're going to make the flying horse work with the fireworks, we need time to set off the fireworks, essentially, and they have to be set in a certain way. And brilliantly, you know, we got what we needed. But it's actually finding those story beats in the tech that are either doubled up, or you suddenly realize that you need 60 seconds more text. It's so much easier if you've spotted it in the tech week and not on preview 3. So I've begun to spend, annoyingly for everybody else, quite a lot of time in the tech, because I've noticed these things and I can note them down. I can talk to the technical team as we're going along, and it just makes it much easier for the writer if they've got their preempt of knowing that they're very likely to need to come up with some more material in a couple of days' time, unless we've solved the pyrotechnical problem. But I think that's something that is, it's something that I've learned at the RSC, I guess because of the scale of the shows. And our texts do tend to be quite short. We have an awful lot to do. But yeah, I've discovered that being around in the tech is dead handy.
You actually give an exact example of something that happened with our playtest. You've browsed the script a little bit, so you know that there are times when the audience gets to vote on, they get to choose, you know, when a certain person will be inhabited by another character, for example. They also make suggestions that sort of make their way into the show in various ways. And what we discovered during the playtest was the mechanism of moving people's attention from the video window, like you and I are talking now, over to the chat channel where the audience is talking with themselves and with the characters who have popped up there, and back. You can do that. But when you're asking them to vote, if you're immediately in business in the video window, then you split the attention. So I ended up writing sort of an extra 15 or 20 seconds for the character of Phi after people have been prompted to vote, so that you're allowed to keep your attention over there while you do that voting thing before we bring you back into the main dialogue between characters here. So it's a very analogous sort of situation to basically, we need another 15 seconds for the audience to do this thing before moving them back to this other place.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I totally get it. You suddenly realize that you need another mechanism to make it work. I had a similar thing on, I worked with Ella Hickson on her version of Wendy and Peter Pan. And we did it in the Royal Shakespeare Theatre. And she had this whole section where she had some characters at the front of the stage talking. And the whole point was that they were talking about Captain Hook, who was creeping along behind them. And he was doing something different. And we discovered really early on that the audience couldn't absorb both pieces of storytelling at the same time. It just wasn't possible because your attention is, you can't look in both places.
Right.
So that piece of storytelling never worked. So she had to rewrite. It's the same.
When you said that there was a story beat that it may have just been an offhand, but was there a specific reference to the lighting cue thing? Was there a play that you were working on where just realizing that you could change the light or some element like that could actually serve for a story piece?
Do you know what? I can't remember what it was. It was probably Oppenheimer. I think that was probably the show.
A big bright flash.
Yeah. It was probably the show that I learned the most on in that regard. Tom originally had right at the end of the show, it was amazing stage direction that he put in as Oppenheimer delivered. I don't know if any of you know the play, but it was a new commission, and it was a big hit for the RSC in the Swan, and then it transferred into the West End. And Tom had written this amazing speech for Oppenheimer, close the play. And the final stage direction was, as he was giving this speech, a bear walked across the stage. And Angus Jackson, who was directing it, and I, for ages, sort of in corners, just went, how do we get him to cut the bear? Like, he really doesn't, like, there's no way we can make a bear walk across the stage. And this speech was so amazing. And eventually I just had to front him out. I just said, Tom, why do you want a bear? And he said, oh, I just wasn't sure that the speech was really landing what it was I wanted to say. And I was like, well, basically what you're doing is the same piece of storytelling twice. So I think it's either the bear or the speech. And we chose speech because actually making a bear in the last 2 minutes of the show was just going to be a disaster. It was just going to be, it wasn't going to work. So I guess maybe it wasn't like it.
Couldn't you just take, like, isn't that bear sitting somewhere in your cast just waiting every 7 years for the Winter's Tale?
There's loads of bears, Sean. Next time you're here, well, I'll take you around the prop store. It's amazing. Amazing.
Well,
loads of bears, loads of babies as well. It's really creepy. Loads of babies and bears. Yeah.
Well, that tempts me to, you now opened a whole new front. We're going to have Stephen Brimson Lewis in 2 days. So if you have anything that we should definitely ask him about that are in the vault, you should
ask
definitely
him.
let us know.
Ask him. I know that Greg had made some models of some prop infants that were the right weight. You should ask Stephen about him. He'll know all about it. Brilliant. There's amazing stuff in there.
That is awesome. Nikki, do you have a question?
I believe Jess, our assistant stage manager, just put in the chat, props and babies and bears, oh my. Which is nice. Traveling a little bit back to the RSC YouTube channel, there's a lot of digital content up there right now, which is really interesting, like Sonnets in Solitude. There was the Midsummer Festival, which included some designers creating fairy cubbies. I can't actually remember what they were called, and little lanterns and stuff, which is really sweet. Yeah. Were you involved in that by any chance, or sort of what was the conversations around developing digital content?
Well, that's a very good question. The conversations around digital content are, we've got a very skeletal staff at the RSC at the moment. So most of us, including me, are furloughed, and there's a very small number of people keeping the good ship RSC afloat. The digital content has been things that we really, really wanted to deliver, and things that we felt that we could deliver. So there are some new, small new sort of chamber pieces that we've made. There's the Midsummer Festival that we've tried to do online. We have been streaming out through a TV channel some of our productions as well, from the main stage. But it's obviously, trying to get some show content out to our audience has been very important for the company, and it's kind of the main topic. It's that, and when we can reopen, which are the two things that we're desperately trying to work out at the moment. But currently, we're not allowed to open theatres, so we're in this very weird sort of waiting, holding pattern, waiting. We've got our actors for our two main stage shows still on staff, with The Winter's Tale and The Comedy of Errors, and we're just hoping that we can get them back into rehearsal, because they were ready to go. They were really ready to go. It's heartbreaking. They were so ready in March, and they've just been waiting ever since, and doing a lot of online work, a lot of schoolwork. Been working with our brilliant education department. They've been doing an awful lot of lesson support and putting out a lot of content for children, because obviously all of the kids haven't been at school since March. Some of them have gone back, but by no means all of them. So that digital content that those actors have been creating with the company has been invaluable, I think.
When, Bensley, you have the schedule in your head, at least for Australian time. When do we start previews?
Ooh, let me just quickly get the calendar in front of me. I believe it's Friday in 2 weeks, Australia time. Nikki, do you have it all?
What date is that?
Yeah, that's what mine says. I've got us on the 31st.
Yeah, 31st is when we're going to be looking at previews, all going well.
And when's the last show?
The last show is August 9th, and I believe that is a US timed one.
Because it is my sad recollection that Pippa is going to be under the sea or in the Himalayas or something.
A slightly rainy holiday in Sussex, I think, is what we're aiming for, if we're allowed to go. But I will have Wi-Fi. I checked.
Oh, will you? Okay,
Yeah.
good. Okay, because we're doing 3 performances for optimal British and Australian viewing, and not to put too fine a point on it, I have to get up at 2:45 in the morning to do them. So I would love for people in Britain and Australia to do them, to see them. And I was worried that you would miss your chance.
No, Wild Horses wouldn't keep me away, Sean. I can't wait to see it. I so enjoyed reading it. It was just so delightful, and it's just brilliantly inventive and extraordinary, and I just can't wait to see what it's like. I can sort of imagine it, but I don't think imagining it or even reading the script really is going to prepare me for the reality of being able to watch it, because it's so deftly crafted. I can't wait. I think it's going to be great.
Well, I sure hope so. The part that you can't see from the script, if I can say this without sounding overbearing, the thing that I know that you might not is how much of the fun will actually be had with the audience having fun with itself in the chat channel, including you. That is, like, you'll find a significant part of the enjoyment will be had with you and the rest of the audience talking to each other, making jokes, explaining bits of it to one another. One of the things that I'm...
The audience as a major character, haven't you?
Yes.
Essentially, it's a whole narrative is going on with the audience. So I mean, it's like the best bit of interactive theatre, isn't it?
Well,
you don't actually have to be there, but you can be there.
Right, right. And it was one of the reasons to make the play was I mean, I don't know if I've told the story to you. I've told the story to them a lot. NIDA reached out right sort of the same week that we had to put a pin in what we were working on this spring at the Royal Shakespeare Company, and asked if there was anything I'd be interested in doing. And I woke up the next morning thinking, oh, I know a theater that people can still go to, a place that you can have a live theater. And that's why I started writing the play. And the thing I've said to a couple of people, but I'll say to you, because it will perhaps arm you at some future conversation with backers or funders or something. In the 20th century, I think cinema had a huge advantage over theater, and that cinema is scalable. You can make it one time, and then you can sell 1 million tickets. In the 21st century, I obviously have a dog in the race that says a huge part of what art is going to be in the 21st century is increasingly interactive. It's less and less broadcast, I made this thing, eat it or don't, and more sort of a dance that you do with the audience. And the thing is that cinema has a very difficult time being interactive. You've got whatever you shot, and you can't get it anymore because that happened 9 months ago. And if you try to offer even sort of the schoolboy version of interactivity of something like Bandersnatch, if you've seen the Black Mirror episode that has sort of, you can choose paths, it's extraordinarily expensive. And at the end of the day, I mean, they did it as well as you can easily do it. It's super expensive. And at the end of the day, it's a choose your own adventure model, which is has real limitations storytelling wise. Live actors can improvise easily all the time. So when you combine the fact that live theater can be interactive in a way that cinema cannot, and live theater can now be performed on platforms like Facebook Live or Twitch, as this show is, suddenly live theater scales every bit as much as cinema scales, and it does a thing that cinema cannot easily do in terms of its ability to interact in real time with a real audience. So I have a theory that I've thrown out there that the 21st century could actually see theater leapfrog back over cinema. And while part of that sounds fanciful, if you grew up as you and I did in sort of the zenith of the movie and TV era, well, I'm older than you, but when I was in college, bands toured to support albums. Now bands drop albums to support tours. Yeah. The money is in the live experience, not in the productized thing, because people want that live experience. I think that it may not be Roundabout, but I think there is a future for theater in which it's performed on these scalable platforms, meaning that large numbers of people can see it, and yet the show is live and in real time in the best kind of way. So I'm hoping that we can...
That's the key, is that it's live. That's what's exciting about it. And that's what's exciting about Roundabout, is that you found a way to be live and interactive and in your living room.
And still tell a crafted story. Like it's one of the things I have to explain to people, I find, is that it's not sort of a selection of improv sketches. It's scripted. Like if you're the Poor Actors, it's 320 pages of scripted. Although any given performance, you're only going to see 90 of them. But it's a very structured piece of work that nonetheless is built to genuinely interact with an audience. That's at least the theory.
I can't wait to see it. It's going to be brilliant.
Any last questions for Pippa, or shall we return her to?
You go
Sorry,
ahead.
I have one last question. As someone who makes a lot of theatre, is there any show or content or production that has kind of been your white whale? Is there anything you've ever wanted to really put on that kind of hasn't presented itself as an opportunity?
I've been so incredibly good and not mentioned the thing that we talked about. So just so you know,
You've been so
she
good.
doesn't know.
No, I'm not. Well, there are some projects that I'm working on at the moment that are dream projects that I have been trying to pull off for a very long time, and I'm hoping that sometime soon we'll be able to announce a very exciting collaboration with a Japanese company. So that one's coming up, but it's currently a secret. I am working with a very brilliant writer and director on a version of Moby Dick, which is actually the white whale. In the spirit of taking on incredibly dense and difficult text, we worked on Don Quixote together, and I feel that if anyone can pull that rabbit out of the hat, it's him. So I hope one day that might see the light of day.
I have to tell you, if a bear was beyond your capabilities, Moby Dick is going to be a hard lift.
Yeah, I mean, we're really hoping some sort of amazing holographic solution will present itself. Because if we could do that on a thrust stage, it would be magic. But we're right at the beginning of the process, so we'll see.
Daniel and Bensley, you now have your marching orders. I can get you a job at the RSC if you solve the giant whale.
Giant whale. Yeah, but you can
Yes.
see on 3 sides. Go on.
No worries. We'll get working on that one and report back.
Thanks very much. Much appreciated.
I guess the cap I should have said this earlier is you're talking to an audience of people who's just about to go out into the world of theater. I thought the story you told at the very beginning, which is basically I was a receptionist and I did extra work and I did a good job and I was pleasant to work with and there was value, is maybe the way it's always been since the beginning of time. Like find a crack and do good work is pretty good advice.
Yeah,
but
I mean, the best advice that I could give, I think, is to get in to make theatre as soon as you can, even if it's in your front room or in your garden or in a shed. Because as soon as you are in a rehearsal room, as soon as you're making shows, you're gaining experience and you're understanding what all of the component parts are. I mean, that was why working as a receptionist was just genius, because I got to talk to everybody in the organization, like literally everyone. So I understood who everybody's job was, what their job was, and what mechanism it had in creating a show and in keeping a company afloat and going. And it's the same in the rehearsal room. Like, just get in there as soon as you can and get elbow deep. Because the theory doesn't help you as much as the practice in this art form, in my view.
the map is really not the terrain.
That's right.
Is it Greg who said that no one besides actors should be allowed to read Shakespeare?
Did he?
There's some
Who would have
somewhat
thought
provocative.
so?
There's some provocative statement. I can't remember the source now, but basically, listen, plays are meant to be seen as plays. Like, the only people, you don't show people storyboards of movies or wireframes of buildings. Like, they walk in the building. Only architects need to see that stuff. So
yeah, his big thing is do it on your feet. Don't sit in a classroom and read it around the room. But anyone can read it, but it's much more fun if you get it on its feet. It works better. That's how it's designed.
Yeah.
That's what it's designed for. Yeah.
You're echoing my sentiments in year 8, refusing to read A Midsummer Night's Dream at home as homework.
I mean,
Give me a movie. I'll watch it as a movie.
yeah, or you know, give me a copy of the script and buy Friends. We'll act it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Then it'll sing.
I guess we're coming to the end. Normally, for context, Pippa, I would ask a question about D&D to our guests, because I found the pattern that creatives seem to be playing D&D. But by Sean's subtle nudge before we started this, I got a feeling the answer's a firm no on the having played D&D before. And I'm interested to see why he was poking at Lord of the Rings. And
So Sean and I went on a trip to the Sundance Festival earlier this year, and he was telling me about his early experience of reading brilliant storytelling, and he was talking about Tolkien, The Hobbit, and The Lord of the Rings. And I'd read them, but it hadn't occurred to me to read them to my daughter, who's 7. And when I got back from Utah, I started reading the books to my daughter. And she was so enthralled and fascinated by the stories. Although I must say, Sean, one of her questions was, why are there no girl dwarves? But anyway, we'll move on. But
we'll come back to that question, but it's also a good question.
Good question. But she was so inspired by those stories that she started writing her own stories. And I sent Sean an email recently to say what an amazingly brilliant suggestion it was from him, and how much the weird period during this global pandemic, in our household anyway, had been infused by Gandalf and the inhabitants of the Shire. And in a way, what a glorious, surreal and weird thing that was. But yes, we definitely now share a love of Tolkien, the two of us. Well, the three of us, because my daughter does as well.
Such a lovely, wholesome story.
The downside of this, of course, is that your daughter might be 55 years old someday and wearing the 7 stars and white tree of Numenor on a sweatshirt, because
that's on the door, right? That they have to get through. Is that right?
There's a version of this. Let's not go down the rabbit hole of Tolkien lore, but
you know what,
yes,
you're right.
there's an equivalent. Yeah, there's an equivalent design at Moria. Different question, but as you know the story that my mom still possesses the very polite cease and desist letter from 1974 from the publishers of The Lord of the Rings, saying that they were not empowered to allow her 8-year-old son to write stories set in Mr. Tolkien's world, and that for that permission we should apply to Warner Brothers Studio at the following address, which I only now understand as the kiss-off that it was. So that work can get you.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think
all right,
that
we've taken so much of your time, but it's been delightful, as I was pretty confident it would be. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on, Pippa.
You're so welcome, and it's so lovely to meet you, you all. And Sean, so lovely to see you after so many months. What a treat. And good luck with Roundabout. I can't wait to see it. I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh, we're looking forward to it too, with perhaps whiter knuckles. But
yeah,
we'll send out the times that are appropriate for viewing in Britain.
Well,
perfect. Thank you.
I guess
Thank you,
I'll
everybody.
I'll do the outro. So we'll Roundabout is going live August 4th Australian time. We'll be closing Sunday 9th of August. There's a heap of different times so that we'll hit the UK and the US. We'll be in the UK time zones Tuesday the 4th of August. It'll be your 11 a.m. And Wednesday the 5th of August, as well as Saturday the 8th of August. We'll also be in the US at 6 p.m. Your Thursday the 6th of August, and your Friday the 7th of August, and your Saturday the 8th of August. Trying to do the quick math in my head since we were talking about that. But thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Pippa, Sean, Daniel, and Nikki for coming on. It's been great. It was a great, wholesome ending to finish up on. And hopefully we'll see you out there soon, Pippa, in the industry. But for now, we'll see you all next time, everyone. Goodbye.
And do it one more time for me.
Oh, I take my jumper off. It's not helping. Omega switch pat. Install. Whoa. I'm Sam.
Sam. Sam.
Whoa, dude, I'm in her yurt.
No. No, no, no.
I'm in her everything.
Good. This is art right here. The thing is, it's not no. It's not no. It's now.
Anyway, there were these people there watching us. And they were, watching the stream and talking about us.
No.
Are you sure they said that, or is that just something you wanted to get off your chest?
NAOU.
Okay, well, that's a bit rude.
No, oh hell! I'm packed!
That's pretty good, right?
That's the best thing I've ever seen you do, Lee.
That was great.
Anyway, there were these people there watching us. And they were, watching the stream and talking about us.
What did they say?
Oh, dude, just like